They didn't announce it. They didn't televise it. While the public was distracted by inflation, elections, and headlines designed to mislead, the biggest financial power shift in American history happened quietly. The Federal Reserve didn't lose a vote. It lost control of the system. Because buried deep inside two recent laws, the Big Beautiful Bill and the Genius Act, is the final transfer of financial control. Not to Wall Street, not to BlackRock, but to the U.S. Treasury. And it's already live. The next phase of the American financial system has begun, and it's not built on paper dollars or interest rates. It's built on code, programmable liquidity, tokenized settlement, real-time rails, and a new command center running all of it without the federal. If you think that sounds extreme, wait until you see the receipts. Because what just happened behind the scenes is bigger than a pivot. It's a replacement. And if you're positioned right, it could be the single greatest wealth shift of your lifetime. Let's break it down. In June, the Big Beautiful Bill passed Congress. Most saw it as a domestic economic reform package, infrastructure, banking updates, standard government noise. But buried inside it was a quiet rewrite of financial command permissions. Specifically, it handed the U.S. Treasury new authority over the digital payment infrastructure of the United States. This includes real-time gross settlement pathways, digital asset bridge protocols, AI-powered compliance enforcement, and full authority to oversee stablecoin clearance mechanisms. That used to be the Fed's job. Not anymore. Then came the second strike. The Genius Act, signed just weeks later, turbocharged this transition. It approved funds for Treasury-coordinated research and deployment of digital dollar infrastructure. But here's the part almost no one saw. The wording of the bill describes an interoperable digital system for domestic and cross-border liquidity management. In plain English, a globally connected tokenized dollar. Not controlled by the federal, but issued, monitored, and cleared by the Treasury. You may be wondering, how can that be possible? Because the system it's running on is already live. On July 14th, ISO 2022 messaging standards went fully active across Fedwire and partner clearing systems. But it's not just a messaging upgrade. It's a key that unlocks full tokenized interoperability. Think XRP, XLM, HBAR, QNT, and Algo. These aren't speculative coins anymore. They're the new financial plumbing. And the Treasury now holds a faucet. Here's where the open loop starts to close. For decades, the Federal Reserve controlled everything. From rate policy to bank reserves, the Fed was the brain and the spine of American finance. But the Fed is incompatible with what's coming. Programmable value, real-time asset swaps, on-chain transparency, tokenized debt protocols. The old tools don't work in this world. So instead of forcing the Fed to evolve, they've quietly moved around it. Here's the proof. Treasury-led task forces are now testing digital settlement layers that bypass Fed infrastructure completely, using ISO-ready digital assets and private-public bridges. In plain terms, the Treasury is running pilot tests on systems that move tokenized dollars across borders and between institutions in seconds without ever touching the federal. And once that network scales, the Federal Reserve becomes ornamental. But let's go deeper, because this shift isn't just about technology or efficiency. It's about control. For over a century, the Federal Reserve operated with a kind of sovereign independence. Its governors weren't elected, its policies weren't directly answerable to the public, and most importantly, its tools were opaque, designed to influence markets in the shadows, not run systems directly. But the new financial infrastructure being activated right now doesn't work in the shadows. It demands transparency, traceability, and programmable intent. And that means the power must shift to an entity that can own those traits, one that is part of the executive branch, tied to the budget, and answerable to the public through law. That entity is the U.S. Treasury. And it's not just overseeing rails, it's shaping the logic of money itself. Because when payments are programmable, value flows can be conditioned, traced, and directed. This opens up possibilities like real-time stimulus, automated taxation, and conditional clearing, all things the Fed was never built to manage. The Treasury, however, is now being architected to handle precisely that. Already, new task forces are developing tokenized fiscal instruments, bonds that auto-adjust in real time, stablecoin reserves that rebalance algorithmically, and compliance systems that flag illicit transfers before they settle. This isn't central banking, it's central engineering. And as the rails mature, the agency building the system becomes a system. That's what's happening. The U.S. Treasury is becoming the operating system for American finance, and the old players, the Fed, the legacy banks, the slow-clearing institutions, are being phased out without a headline. No protests, no mass layoffs, just a silent protocol upgrade. Still there, still making speeches, but no longer the actual engine. Now pause and think about what that means. If the U.S. Treasury controls the rails, if the tokenized dollar clears on XRP-led infrastructure, if the Fed is just a ceremonial relic, then everything is different now. It's not about rate cuts or CPI anymore. It's about access to the code that runs the system. And while the average American is still worried about paper inflation, the infrastructure for wealth, power, and clearance is being rebuilt in digital code. But here's the twist. This shift isn't being hidden anymore. It's just not being explained. Because unless you understand ISO tokens, liquidity corridors, and central banking architecture, the press release means nothing. But to those paying attention, this is the moment we've waited for. XRP was never about retail flips. It was about replacing the plumbing. And now it's being installed right under the public's nose. So what's next? Here's what's coming. First, expect a sudden acceleration in Treasury-led infrastructure announcements. They'll use vague terms like digital modernization or cross-agency liquidity optimization, but what it really means is total Treasury dominance of the digital system. Second, expect Fed influence to fade. They'll still signal and still adjust rates, but the true velocity of money, programmable and real-time, will no longer flow through them. And third, the wealth transfer begins. Because ISO tokens are not speculation anymore. They're the keys to the system. And if you're holding those keys when the door is fully open, you're no longer on the outside. You're on the inside of the greatest monetary reset of the modern age. The question is, will you act before everyone else wakes up? Because by the time this shift becomes obvious, the prices won't be. They'll be long gone. So position yourself now. Do your research. Don't just hold, understand. Because this isn't just a new system, it's a new gate. And it's already closing behind the early ones who got in. And this isn't just a macroeconomic shift, it's a generational opportunity. Because when a system this large transitions to something new, the people who understand it first, who prepare early and position themselves accordingly, always benefit most. Every major leap in financial history has created a wave of asymmetric upside. The birth of equities, the rise of sovereign bonds, the invention of the internet, and now the tokenization of everything. We are standing at the doorway of programmable money, real-time value clearance, and institution-grade on-chain liquidity. And the keys to that system, XRP, XLM, HBAR, and other ISO-native protocols, are still widely misunderstood by the public. But those paying attention, they're not just speculating. They're aligning with the new code. Because in a digital economy, the protocol is the power. And ownership is no longer just about holding dollars. It's about holding rails. For more raw, unfiltered insights like this, months ahead of the mainstream, subscribe to Wealth Signal and stay locked into the new financial era before it fully goes live.